And so when I had my spiritual awakening back in 2021, I believed that I was reborn. It felt like I had the biggest ego death of all time, and I was certain that my ego was never to return. Which I'm laughing at, because how deluded was I that I thought that my ego was never going to return? Yes, in those moments, I couldn't feel the ego. I could only feel the powerful love of soul. But it certainly did return, and it returned with a disguise of spiritual ego, where I assumed that my life would be love and light and unicorns and rainbows, and it was, but there was also a lot of stuff that was still going on underneath the surface. What is the shadow self that we hear, and why do we need it? Hi, my name is Eleni, and what I love talking about more than anything in the world is everything from the perspective of ego and soul. So when we talk about our shadow self, it is our ego self. Now, our ego is not bad, but it needs to be understood. And this is where I come into it. So our ego is our personality. It is our smaller self. It's actually our false self, because we think that we are the ego, and we are not. The ego is a mental program that's been programmed within us over thousands of years of living on planet Earth. And no, this is not a conspiracy theory video where I'm going to talk about some dark and nefarious forces doing this to us. I'm just going to be talking about my perspective on what I understand our shadow self to be and why it is so necessary. And so when I had my spiritual awakening back in 2021, I believed that I was reborn. It felt like I had the biggest ego death of all time, and I was certain that my ego was never to return. Which I'm laughing at, because how deluded was I that I thought that my ego was never going to return? Yes, in those moments, I couldn't feel the ego. I could only feel the powerful love of soul. But it certainly did return, and it returned with a disguise of spiritual ego, where I assumed that my life would be love and light and unicorns and rainbows, and it was, but there was also a lot of stuff that was still going on underneath the surface, which needed to come out. And as soon as one layer is eradicated, there's another layer underneath that. And as soon as that's eradicated, there's another layer underneath that. There's another layer underneath that. It doesn't end. It's a never-ending story as we rid ourselves of our shadow self, the part of us that no longer belongs to us, as we shift and move into a new way of being, into a new reality. So why do we need our shadow self? How are we going? How would we understand the light when we don't see the shadow first? It's impossible to know light unless you see shadow. It's impossible to understand what it means to live with integrity unless we have lived with that integrity first. It's impossible to know what truth and honesty and authenticity is unless we have lied to ourselves and others. We need to understand these concepts with a lived-in experience of what the opposite means. And to some extent, we've all had that lived-in experience. Some of us more than others, but all of us over the course of many lifetimes have experienced every degree of shadow that the ego offers. And so the shadow self comes out to show us that it's there. So if we're living a life where we can't see the shadow, it just means that you haven't allowed yourself to feel it, because it's there. You have bypassed it, you have pushed it away, you have pretended that it doesn't exist within you, but it's there. We're all capable of being our worst self, and we're all capable of being our true, authentic, best self. And so when the shadow comes out to play, rather than wishing it didn't come out, like it could be that you're really fearful about something. As an example, at the moment, I'm going through something with my fiance, and I see my shadow come out. I see the defensiveness come out. I see the need to be accepted and loved come out. I see the need to prove that I'm the best partner come out. That's the ego, because the soul doesn't need to prove anything. The soul doesn't need to influence anybody to love it, because it knows that it is love. It knows that when its true essence, it can only radiate from a place of love. That's its true nature. So we need to be loving of our shadow and know that that's part of the human experience. It's why we're on planet Earth, to experience it all. But also understanding that our shadow self can only take us to a certain point. And beyond that, when we really want to live as soul, we want to lead the way to a new earth, a new way of living, a new perspective, the shadow can't take us there. But it can sit in the back seat and come for the ride. We don't have to try and get rid of it, try and cut it out of our life. We just make sure that it's not driving the car. We just make sure that it's just sitting in the back seat and coming along for the ride, but we never let it take over the steering wheel, because it believes in separation. It believes at winning at all costs. It believes that people are out to get them. Whereas the soul knows that we are all one, we all come from one, that we're all going back to one, and that there is no competition, and that we will always be taken care of at every part of the journey. And so when your shadow self comes out of the closet, maybe it comes out in terms of anger or sadness or hurt or guilt, just observe it like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why it's playing up today. I wonder what's going on for it. What's there to learn next? Because there's always a next. Just when you think you've got everything figured out, there is always a next. The next layer, the next learning, the next lot of growth, the next. And so don't assume that you've got it all figured out. Just remember the phrase, the more that I learn things, the more I know nothing. And the more I know that I don't know enough. And so let's just observe with curiosity and understand that it's there for a reason. And that's the same when we're speaking with other people too, that their shadow self comes out because it needs to come out. It needs to be seen. It needs to be felt. It needs to be experienced so that we can then make a choice about remembering who we really are, which is love, at our truth and at our essence. If this video made some sense to you and it resonated with you, I'm going to be sharing many videos from the perspective of soul and the perspective of ego. Everyday life from the perspective of soul and the perspective of ego. Please subscribe. Please give me your comments and your thoughts. And I send you so much love from my ego and my soul. See you later.